Hey there berries, welcome to my 12.14 support tier list. Sorry we didn't do one for last patch, but honestly there wasn't enough changes for me to even warrant looking at doing stuff. But this is probably the most devastating support patch in quite a long time, especially if you are an Enchanter main. There are a lot of healing nerfs, a couple of Enchanters that are getting nerfed as well on top of what you're seeing on screen at the moment. Plus there's a bunch of game mechanic things that are happening which will also hinder Enchanter supports. So we could maybe potentially see the fall of Enchanters. From what I understand is that Riot has said there's too much healing in this game. I personally think that this whole patch is complete, let's just say, scuffed. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit biased since I play support, but I think a lot of these changes are unwarranted, and I never usually I never complain about the balanced team, or I try not to, at least anyway. But I think this patch is probably the one that doesn't make any sense at all. We're gonna go through everything. There's a lot to go through. And there's some dramatic changes to the tier list. I think also they're changing some of this stuff as well to get ready for Worlds, even though we're only at the end of July, and I think Worlds is still not for another 2 or 3 months. But they're preparing for it. But there's a lot of fundamental changes here. So as you might have been reading already, a lot of the Enchanter items are getting nerfed in terms of their healing value. So from 2 to 4% being knocked off. So stuff flowing water, they're going from 10 to 8% total healing and shielding. Redemption and Michael's are losing 4%. Moonstone getting hit by the most here, so pretty much any Enchanter that uses Moonstone is basically getting wrecked. So you're losing quite a high amount of percentage value on items just from the shield and heal power, just from using your normal build. So overall you're probably going to be losing around about 10% healing if you are a Moonstone main, which is pretty terrible, especially if you are playing some of the other Enchanters later on that are getting direct nerfed as well. Some other huge fundamental changes. Some of these will be affecting everyone. So like health potion healing lowered from 150 to 120. It's making health potions extremely more expensive. You've got the refillable potion as well being nerfed, so that's 125 down to 100. You've got a Sunfire Aegis nerf, which didn't really affect supports, so that we won't really brush over that too much. One thing to note is that Chemtech Chainsword is being increased, so the healing that we're losing will make it so that hopefully that there's not as much grievous wounds in the game anyway, because the Chemtech is being increased by 200, but we'll have to see about that. But wait, there's more. Got another, this slide and one more to look at. So on top of all of those changes, so all of those item Enchanter nerfs, we've got direct nerfs to Yuumi. She's losing 5% AP ratio on her E. And we've got a Seraphine nerf, which is basically her whole Enchanter side is getting nerfed. So 10% are lost on AP ratio on W, which is huge. The heal ratio is also going down by a huge chunk as well. So Seraphine is basically no longer an Enchanter, which doesn't really make sense because they've always kind of wanted her in that support role, but they were nerfing her Enchanter side, so maybe trying to make her more of a mage, but they haven't done anything to compensate for that. So Seraphine wasn't overall, in my opinion, that strong anyway, but she's just getting nerfed. I guess they just don't want to see it in Worlds or something, so I don't know. The only support buff, champion buff at least anyway, is Alistair. Alistair's Q is getting buffed, so he'll be able to engage potentially slightly more, or get a second Q if he's stuck in the middle of a team fight. So the only champion buff there for supports is Alistair in terms of a direct buff. But if you go into more system mechanical changes, we have some of the things still from mentioned earlier with the potions. But the other one that we will need to take note of is that Exhaust is being nerfed until level 9. So you're only going to be reducing 30% of the enemy's damage as opposed to 40 until you hit level 9. Another huge support change coming as well with the biscuits. We're losing 2% there because they're nerfing the potions, which means also less mana regeneration, which screws over pretty much the majority of enchanters because most enchanters take biscuit delivery. Bone plating also being nerfed, so if you're an enchanter taking that, you've also got nerfed. There are a couple of tanks that were potentially taking that. I think most tanks generally more towards conditioning, but hey, guess what? Conditioning's been nerfed as well. Guardian has also been nerfed, so if you were one of the few people taking Guardian on any champion, that's also been nerfed. We've got one minor buff potentially for enchanters, is that Scorch is being buffed, but I think most people have been taking Gathering Storm these days at least anyway. Second Wind, hey, another support thing that a lot of supports used to take, well, a decent amount of supporters would take, especially if you're playing tank against poke. That's got nerfed as well. Anything else here? I mean, we got Unflinching, yeah, sure, why not? Let's just nerf that as well. So basically, a lot of fundamental runes for both tank supports and enchanters have been nerfed. So mages have generally been left untouched, so you've got stuff like Brand, Zyra, Seraph. Technically they've all been buffed a little bit. I mean, they would be affected maybe by the biscuits, maybe, well, they technically got buffed because a lot of them take Scorch just to get a laning phase advantage. So the only kind of supporters really that have got buffed this patch are like the AP mages, but if you care about, you know, the support enchanters in particular, they're just being absolutely like ripped across the board. There is another change here as well which will be affecting, so I don't know, there's a lot to take in at the moment, but there is another thing that you should be aware of, is that the Drakes, and now the Drakes now also getting buffed, so this has several implications for bot lane. So in previous seasons when dragons have been stronger, it's meant more emphasis on bot lane ganks and having bot lane priority. This has generally led to top lane feeling neglected. So expect more 3v3s, 4v4s, or 2v4s in the bot lane. Some things to look at is like the Mountain Drake buff that's going from 6% to 9% armor magic resist buff. So this technically would potentially buff tank supports. Ocean Drake healing's been increased because that's a thing that they're happy with in terms of increased healing, but all the rest of the healing is apparently not legitimate. Infernal Drake also AD/AP increase, so once again that affects more the mage supports. Enchanters will benefit ever so slightly from this, but nothing too crazy. Hextech Dragon, everyone would generally benefit from that at least anyway. Cloud Drake buff, 3.5% slow resist to 7% slow resist. So if you were playing, I guess this is a nerf against a lot of the AP mages supports, because if you have like, if you want to run like a Rylai's, or if you have lots of slows in your kit anyway, like Zyra plant slows, or you know, even like Zeref has his W slow. Just trying to think of it, a couple of other things. You get the gist at least anyway, like Valkon's Q. Enemy team will have more slow resist to, you know, move out of the follow-up skill shots. Anything else to take note here? So dragon base damage as well has gone down dramatically. So this could also lead to junglers potentially just taking dragon super early. So you might need to think about warding the dragon. Like for example, the Cloud Dragon used to like wreck through a jungler, and it made it incredibly dangerous for them to solo. But I mean, the whole damage has gone down by like 30%. I really don't understand like any of these changes, honestly. I guess they want to try and speed up the game and cause more fights in bot lane river. But at the same time, they've completely like gutted a lot of the support. So supports are basically like gone from decent early lane-ish presence to that's been now reduced slightly because of the rune changes, but they can't quite scale up as high as they were before because of all the percent healing changes. So yeah, I don't know. I think this patch is terrible. If you enjoy playing support, I think this is probably the worst patch for supports in a very, very long time. So how does that correlate into the tier list? There's been a lot of shifting around. This is right at the bottom, but I've moved a couple of champions. Some champions have been doing really, really well. exceptionally well in solo queue in terms of support, and they haven't been touched, and we'll talk about those in a second. But right at the bottom, you know, Yuumi had those nerfs and she's still in tier 4. She's now much worse. I was considering putting her in tier 5 honestly, but I didn't want to upset all the Yuumi players, all 2 of you. Thresh, I mean, don't forget this tier list is kind of focused on unranked to around about like lowish plat. Thresh, I think, has the potential to be moved up into tier 3, but because of the lantern issues and people lacking up and following up on engages and things like that, he's still kind of in the tier 4. I did move Brand. I did move Shaco up from tier 4 into tier 3. Amumu from tier 4 to tier 3. Ashe is still there in the tier 3. So there's a lot of rock, paper, scissors going on here now. Oh, and Seraphine also, has been moved down. I believe I put her in tier 2 before. She's now been moved into tier 3. I think she's still got that really, really strong ultimate, but the Enchanter stuff's still going to be a problem. Well, in terms of the rock, paper, scissors, so generally tank supports haven't been changed too much. They've been nerfed a little bit earlier, but not as much as enchanters. So overall tank enchanters have got slightly stronger over enchanters. Mages generally unchanged, really, but mages weren't doing particularly too well anyway, apart from like bronze, maybe very low silver. Stuff like Brand has always had a 50%, over 50% win rate in low yellow, but he did get those direct nerfs about a month ago. So I'm on the ropes whether or not to push him up from tier 3 to tier 2 at the moment. I would say be on the side of caution on picking Brand too much. Shaco did move up because his win rate at the moment in solo queue's been doing like pretty decently, but not a lot of people know how to play him properly. So play that one at your own risk as well. I still think tank supports, if you are in the unranked to low plat, are going to be still difficult to play for you. Whether it's because people aren't following up, or if you're just going to be generally particularly in the lower elos, tank support players don't really know how to play their champions properly or optimally, and you need to be playing. If you're playing frontline, you need to know exactly when you can go in. You need to know the cooldowns of a lot of enemy abilities and your own champion abilities on your team in order to understand when it's okay to go in and when to exploit those windows. So tank supports are always generally going to be pretty hard to play, but they have got slightly easier this patch. And I do correlate that with the tier 2. We did move a couple of champions up into tier 2, and you can see there's been potentially a couple that have been dropped into tier 2 from tier 1. Leona's been moved up. Alistair's been moved up, I believe. I moved both of them up from tier 3 to tier 2. Soraka, I kept in tier 2 for now. I'm not 100% sure about, because the changes are like dramatic, but I'm not sure how dramatic. Ones I want you to keep your eye on are Soraka, Senna, Zillion, and Janna. I know there's like a lot there, but there's a few question marks here in my head. So Senna, in theory, she does really well against enchanters, and because enchanters have been nerfed, she'll be stronger into them. But because tanks have also, she's weak against tanks, but tanks have improved, so she will suffer more against those tanks more than before, but she will do better against the enchanters. So only pick Senna against enchanters, okay? Okay. Soraka's having a lot of healing nerfed. She's a Moonstone user, so that will affect her a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if she dips into tier 3. It's just that her win rates at the moment are like, base rate is pretty high, so she will be moving down, but how much that's going to be affected by, I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure things like Ocean Drake buff, where you're now healing more missing HP over time, that will help Soraka out, because obviously she can potentially use her own health pool to heal allies. So you might have a slight buff there for Soraka, but that's like the only real thing. Everything else in her kit is generally pretty good, but you know, the healing overall has been nerfed. Janna has been generally doing pretty good anyway, just because of her base kit. It will affect obviously the amount of shields and heals that she does, but I don't feel that that's an absolute core fundamental of her kit. Will she lose win rate? For sure. How much? Still to be determined. If tank supports are going to be increased in play rate, Janna's still a good option against that, depending on your own mechanical skill in order to disengage from that. So Janna is still potentially like a general solid tier 2 at the very least. Zillion, I was thinking about putting into tier 1. I actually put him back into tier 2. I think he's going to do pretty well this patch. I'm just not sure how much, but he's definitely on the higher end of tier 2. He could potentially be tier 1, so do keep your eye on that pick. Blitzcrank, I did move down into tier 1 to tier 2 just because I probably overrated him slightly in terms of his win rate. His win rate is just over 50% win rate at the moment, but I believe he'll go up slightly with this patch, but not enough to push him into tier 1, but I think he's still a pretty good pick. Moving up into tier 1. There are some champions here that might be slightly confusing, but bear with me. Tarek technically has not been nerfed at this patch. Okay, so even though he does a lot of healing and stuff, he doesn't pick up any of those items I mentioned earlier. So Tarek got buffed. Well, buffed compared to the rest of the supports, okay? He's quite in a unique situation. And the same with Renata as well. She never took healing or shielding either. And I know some of you probably took Guardian, but I like doing my Arcane Comet build, and my Arcane Comet build has generally been untouched by this. The only thing you might suffer on is the mana regeneration from cookies, but Mana Flow Band helps prevent too much from that anyway. So I think my Arcane Comet build on Renata is actually going to be pretty even stronger now. It seems to be getting slowly buffed over every patch. But I think Tarek and Renata are the top two, like clear top 2 favorites coming into this patch. So if you want some certainty going into the patch, Renata, Tarek, guaranteed above 50% win rate. We're talking probably 53-54% win rates on both of them at this rate, because they're by far the most standout picks in the whole entire tier list. Nami is still going to be a really solid choice. Why? She never took Moonstone. She always took Imperial Mandate. Sona, you might still want to do Moonstone. Shirilius is now looking like a better option potentially on Sona. So do factor that in. She will be able to speed up a lot of your allies and yourself. So Sona, potentially Shirilius rather than Moonstone. We'll have to look at the stuff as the patch goes on, whether that shift is definitely going to be like the best option, but it's looking like it. Zyra is probably going to be the best pure DPS mage still coming into this patch in 12.14. Yeah, so if you want to play a mage and you want to kind of exploit the fact that mages haven't really been nerfed at all, then Zyra is probably the safest pick that you can do in terms of that. So those are the top 5. There's a lot to digest. So the key things to take this patch are enchanters have been nerfed, tank supports have slightly been nerfed, mages have been unchanged, dragon has been buffed, so expect more ganks in the bot lane, and yeah, enjoy this miserable patch. Sorry to be so bleak, but it's gonna feel rough. And also don't forget that your potions and stuff are gonna be healing you for less, and cookies is gonna be giving you less regeneration. That's gonna be one of the biggest laning phase quality of life as well. Oh, and exhaust won't be necessarily be as strong. Not that you should necessarily be taking exhaust. Hopefully your AD carry is picking that up, but exhaust isn't going to be mitigating quite as much damage early on in the laning phase. Well, I wish you all the best, good luck, and let me know how your solo queue climb goes this patch.